okay, where they put your name in capital letters, because we're in the capital system, you see, it's the money system, capital, money. So they put you in the capital system by putting your name in capital letters, and they give you a title of Mr., Mrs., Miss. Now, if you agree or contract to say that you are Mr., Mrs., Miss, you've actually contract to say that you've missed it as a flesh and blood man and woman. To nullify all these things, you simply have these stickers made up. In fact, there's two on this one together. It reads, return to sender. I do not recognise you. I do not understand your intent. I do not have an international treaty with you. No assured value, no liability. And you pop that back in the post. And that's the end of your penalty notice, your summons. You just nullify that because you haven't contracted to that, okay? Now, I don't know what time it is because what I'm saying at the moment is part of my presentation later on. So, is it 5 o'clock yet? Half four, is it? So, I'm saying this as a remedy for people who may not be able to make it later. I don't have time now to cover an important issue in relation to mortgages because people need to hear remedies. You can talk about the problems and cows come home, but people need remedies in relation to mortgages and debt, and how to prevent their home from being repossessed by the banks, and how to prevent eviction by the sheriff, which is the Sheriff, which is an English title, isn't it? The Sheriff comes from Nottingham. Yeah? So you got to ask yourself, well, what are these people doing in their country? What is an English sheriff doing in Ireland? You've got to ask yourself this. What are the courts in Ireland, bar courts, another acronym for British Accredited Registry, what are these English courts doing in our country? Why are they wearing British Crown Colony wigs? Okay? The only reason why they are able to evict you from your home is because you contracted unwittingly with these courts by answering their summons or attending the courts and saying you understand. Once you say you understand, it means you stand under their alleged authority. I'm going to give you a quick remedy because people need to know this. If you have €1,000 to pay or to find every month to give to the banks to stay in your home, and you can't do that, and you can only afford, let's say, 500. Well, after you feed your family quite well, give them 200. You don't have to give them £1,000 a month. Give them 500 yo-yos, washers, whatever you want to call it. It's not even legal tender anyway. You've got to check that these euro notes, it doesn't even state legal tender on them. It doesn't have a full date, it doesn't state bank, and there are no signatures. So why are we worried about this fictitious money having control over our lives? Because it's all fiction. To make you up, it doesn't exist. It's all in our minds. We give it the power by giving it power. It's the, let's go give her something here, folks. Look for a copy of the Irish pound. Anybody remember these things? Yeah? My first job, I think I got 20 of those a week. What was that? A car? You remember it, yeah? You had to pay for a house. You had to have a good night out. On one of those, you go out, you'd have plenty of drink, 2 people, you'd have meals. It was a great time. Got some pictures. I think they call it the movies now. So they've brainwashed the people into a new order, you know? They brainwashed people very, very subtly, very, very slowly. So if you look at these notes, it did state Central Bank of Ireland, although it's a central bank, it did state the word bank. It did state legal tender note. It did have a full date, a day, month and year. And it had 2 signatures, 2 signs of nature, because that's what a signature is. And the 2 signs of nature was Whittaker, and Whittaker was the governor of the bank. And the other guy was the Department of Finance, his name was Murray. So you check your euro notes, you don't see any of that. So it's just monopoly money. So they're holding everybody to ransom on this fictitious money. So why do we really, how has it destroyed all our lives here? You know? Like, we allow this to happen to ourselves. So give them 200 yo-yos a week, a month, rather than thousands. Give them 50 euros a week. So you're not refusing to perform on this alleged debt. It's only an allegation anyway. So the simple way out, what I found over the years, hard learned, and you know, dealing with the sheriff, the taxman, compulsory purchase orders, VAT man, you name it, the courts have been through it all. The simple way of doing this, because it takes a long time for you to comprehend the information and implement it, that takes too long. We don't have the time. The simple way of changing things is massive non-compliance. You don't have to pay income tax. You don't have to go to courts. You don't have to pay summonses, fines, penalties, household charges. You simply return to the sender. Now, in relation to the mortgage, you give them 50 euros a week. If you can't afford 50 euros, give them 20. And the simple way of doing that is you go into the bank, you don't ask permission. You just go into the bank and you lodge, let's say, 50 euros in the lodgement slip. You just slide it across the counter, you get your receipt on the lodgement slip, and that's proof of your performance. And more above and beyond that, it's proof that the bank has actually accepted your performance. Okay? So there's a contract there. But the contract is being rearranged on your terms and conditions without even signing anything other than the lodgement slip. You don't have to ask permission. There's no need to ask permission for anything, folks. You just act. You do. You perform. You take responsibility, like the film here. Okay? You don't say, is it okay, have I permission to park here? Or is it okay to stand here? You know, you better, people need to start waking up here. You go into the bank, you perform on it, you fill out your lodging slip, give them the 50 yo-yos, get your receipt. You do that every week. And what you've proved is that your intention to make restitution on this alleged debt. Now, whether it's a debt or not is another story. That's a talk for another day, let's say. But what you've proved on the record is that you are not refusing to perform on this contract. You've actually proved your intent to make restitution. And you've actually increased it by fourfold. They can't get a judgment against you. That's a simple remedy. They can't get a judgment against you in the courts to evict you from your home. Because you've proved your intent to make restitution. You've performed on it. They've actually accepted your terms and conditions by accepting that lodgement. And you have the receipts to prove it. They won't even dream of taking you into court because it's going into the High Court anyway, and the kickstart fee in High Court is 25 grand for that side, 25 grand for that before the ball game starts. That's why it's paid in court. Okay? It's a racket. And the sooner the better people realise that. Okay? It's just a racket. You do not have to go into these courts because they are not sovereign Irish courts. They're only bar courts. Okay? Now, if you go into a court, does anybody know what this is? Anybody who... Well, that's actually the sovereign seal. Okay? It's 13 string with arrow underneath. So, what denotes the sovereign court is that this sovereign cartouche has to be elevated above the judge, or the Brehon, right? It's this principle of Brehon law, which we can still invoke. If you recall Article 40.1.1 states in the ruling text draft, we have invincible rights which are more ancient and higher than any human statute. What does that tell you? Ancient. We're talking about Brehon law here going back at least 12,000 years. We can invoke it at any time. Okay? Under Article 41.1. We don't need that anyway to invoke it, but this is a little bit of a, wakey up here. Wake up and invoke this. more rights, more ancient and higher than any human statutes. It's telling you there in Article 41.1. So we can invoke ancient Breton law. And better still, we can stick the judge to it, can't we? Because that's all the judge did. So you can ask the judge for his oath of office. You don't have to do it all the time, but I do it in certain situations. I don't do it in the district court, I do it in the High Court. Because things are a bit, more intense there. This is why they have high currency. It's all to do with currency or energy. Anyway, so here we have the sovereign seal. Now that was adapted. Does anybody, I'm going to ask you another question here. Does anybody know America's Day of Independence? Anybody, any idea? Hands up. The 4th of July. Now, I know there might be one or two people here who know the answer to the next question, so I'm going to ask you to not give it away. I'm going to ask you, what's Ireland's Day of Independence? No takers. Nobody knows Ireland's Day. St. Patrick's Day, yeah, that's why we give it St. Patrick's Day, so we can get drunk and get locked and forget anything. Yeah, that's January, yeah. You see, we medicated our brains to, we did fight for independence, didn't we? How do we know America's Day of Independence and we don't know our own National Day of Independence? What's gone wrong here? How successful are they to medicate our brains? They've been a gigantic success. Well, Ireland's National Day of Independence is the 21st of January 1919. Okay? Tell all your friends. And every year in the Mansion House, the first doll sat in the Mansion House at noon on the 21st of January 1919. You can check that in your history books if they haven't airbrushed that out. But we're painting it back in. So every year on the 21st of January in the Mansion House, the sovereign seal has to be turned. North, south, east and west. It's due the elements of time and claiming of our sovereignty as a sovereign nation. And on the record, everybody, all Irish men and women and children, became sovereign on the record on that day. Alright? Now, what happened since then was that England couldn't have a sovereign republic. They allowed people over the world to declare a republic. Ireland is the only country in the world that declared a sovereign republic on that day, or any day for that matter, as far as I know. So, what happened after that was the War of Independence was instigated because a sovereign republic was not in the interest of the Crown, anywhere in the globe. So, essentially what sovereignty means is that you, me, all of us, the people, have the God-given right to return all offers of contract in the post-December. For example, as long as you don't break the law and cause harm, loss and injury, you're not breaking law. You may offend an act, because when you get a little summons in your post, summoning you or beckoning you to court, it's only an allegation. Everything is an allegation. It's alleged that you offended Road Traffic Act such and such, or whatever it may be. You drove through the air too fast. Where's the injured party here? Did I hurt the air? Did I offend the air? No, all you did was offended an illegal instrument under the Crown. So what you've done in 1922, after King George got his nose in, he created a thing called the Oireachtas. Anybody hear the Oireachtas? It kind of rings a bell, doesn't it? The Oireachtas. Well, the Oireachtas was established by King George V in 1922. As an opposition to the sovereign republic that was already declared. And the Oireachtas is a construct under the Crown. So both houses of the Oireachtas, the so-called Dáil, but we already had a sovereign Dáil in 1919, and sovereign courts. So the War of Independence was instigated, and the Oireachtas was formed by King George V, and they fictitiously brought the Dáil and the Seanad under the umbrella and called both houses of the Oireachtas. So what happened after that, there was a census in 1911. And the census gathered all the information on the people in this country. Because they view us as the bond. We're the sovereign bond. Okay? So they had to get all the information on the sovereign bonds. Okay? Held in bondage, or the age of bonds, stocks and shares. So we're human resources. That's what we call it, human resources. You have natural resources and human resources. We're just the human resources. So after the census of 1911, to get all the stock, to get a check on the stock, they had to do it within the 100-year period, and we had a census in 2011, didn't we? Anybody ever ask what the census was about? Did anybody ask, did anybody not fill it in? Everybody else complied. Okay. Did anybody see, I know I didn't anyway. Did anybody ever see a harp on the census form? No? So, why did you fill it in? Why did you fill in a form with no harp, gold harp, on top? Because it needs a gold harp on all these so-called government forms to make it even legal, lawful, valid, and bona fide. There's no sovereign seal harp on the census form in 2011. But yet everybody complied to fill it in. And then what happened after that? Well, we had a visitation, hadn't we? We had a visitation from one of King George's heirs and successors. I think her name was Elizabeth. And what did she wear? She wore the sovereign seal, didn't she? Nice gold sovereign seal harp in Dublin Castle. And she was having dinner with members of none other than the Oireachtas. One big party. And then what happened? Well, all the people who filled in the census and gave all the information on who they are, and what they eat, and when they leave their house in the morning, and what they drive, how many kids they have. They gave all that to the Crown. You gave all your information back to the Crown. They're going to tax the hell out of you. This is why all this stuff is kicking in. You're going to get all the offers of contract through your letterbox that you never imagined. All because you gave them all your information and then you gave them your sign of nature on top of that. That's why Queen was here. I've not personally against the woman, no. I don't know her. But that's the con. That's how much you're medicated. To accept and comply with these regulations that have nothing to do with your life. They didn't create you. Something called a God or a creator created all of us, flesh and blood, and there's no man or woman or construct of government can do that. So we don't have any authority over it, unless you give it to them. Does anybody get the message here? What's going on?
Yes.
Yeah? I know you do. In one. You didn't drink the tap water.
It's filtered a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. This is what, so you need to filter your taps. That's for starters. You need to stop watching television, video games, X Factor. You know? I mean, I'm not a square. I kind of enjoy a drink, like, you know. I go out and have a good time. But I don't sit down in front of a television and get programmed. I don't drink tap water because I have a filtration system on it. Because they ain't going to take it out of water. You can lobby and lobby and lobby. They ain't going to do it. Because they need you to be compliant. The contracts are worth tens of millions anyway, so they ain't going to give it up anyway. Okay? Now, I think Ben is going to give a talk. Are you on next?
I'm going to do Ben's video first.
Okay, because well, I've just been shooting the breeze on as part of the presentation later on, PowerPoint presentation. So, I think you'll ask if you need to read that schedule, is it? Okay. Okay, folks.
Okay, thanks very much, Harry. Harry has a website called We the People. wethepeople.ie. He's researched a lot of this information and he's been spending, I don't know how many years, putting it into the public domain. we're trying to get people to wake up to what's really going on in this country as opposed to what we're led to believe by RT and the mainstream media and that type of thing. So we're going to have Ben Gilroy speaking in a little bit. I'm going to show Ben's the sheriff video as well, the famous video. We're going to stick that up. And then he's going to do a talk, and then at the end he'll take questions and answers before that type of thing. So we'll just give it a wee minute. We're going to play the video now when Vin comes back. Anybody know where Vin is? Can somebody get him for me? Because I need to get him to play this video.